We're honored to have U.S. Senator Brian Schatz presenting today's keynote address. Public service has been the foundation of Senator Schatz's life. Senator Schatz has represented Hawaii in the U.S. Senate since 2012. He currently serves on the powerful Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, and the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. He is also a member of the Senate Select Committee on Ethics. Before going to Congress to represent Hawaii, Senator Schatz served as Lieutenant Governor for the state of Hawaii. And before that, he served in the Hawaii State House of Representatives for 8 years and also served as the CEO of Helping Hands Hawaii. Please welcome Senator Brian Schatz.
Aloha and good morning. I want to take a moment to recognize Isaiah, the future foreign policy advisor for the Pacific Command in 10 years, for his extraordinary remarks. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our veterans and their families who are here with us, and our distinguished guests, including Senator Hirono, Congresswoman Gabbard, Congressman Takai, and an incredible delegation from the United States House of Representatives, Mayor Caldwell, Admiral Swift. I'd like to thank the U.S.S. Missouri Memorial Association for bringing us together to commemorate this important day and to reflect on how it shaped America's role in the world. Today, we remember the extraordinary commitment that was required of the many Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice to defeat the forces of tyranny and defend freedom for future generations. It was here in this harbor, nearly 74 years ago, where peace was shattered, and America was drawn into one of the most destructive conflicts in history. That day of infamy and the events that followed would ultimately galvanize more than 12 million Americans, men and women, to serve in uniform during the Second World War. It was a war that lasted 2,194 days, stretching from the piers of Pearl Harbor to the beaches of Normandy, from the densely forested Ardennes to the fortified shores of Iwo Jima. It was a war that leveled whole cities, it left entire countrysides barren. It widowed husbands and wives and orphaned sons and daughters. It touched nearly every person on the planet. We remember the men and women who fought in the Second World War, those brave Americans who said goodbye to their families to protect their neighbors, who foreclosed the promise of achieving their own dreams to protect our freedoms as the greatest generation. They came together from across America, farmers, factory workers, students, spouses, mothers and fathers. This was the whole United States of America. They left their homes to fight an enemy they did not know, in places they had never heard of. They did not do it for glory. They answered the call simply because they loved their country, they loved their community, and they loved their freedom. We all know well the stories of courage and devotion, the Tuskegee Airmen, the 442nd Infantry Regiment. We remember their ingenuity and heroism, like that of Doolittle's Raiders, the Navajo Code Talkers, and the Nisei Translators. In remembering these Americans, we also recognize the sacrifices of the hundreds of thousands who fought with them in Europe and the Pacific, our partners from the UK and France, from the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, and the many other countries who took up arms to defend the world against fascism. We reflect, too, on the millions of Americans who participated in the war effort back home, the 6 million women who worked on the assembly lines helping to produce tanks and airplanes, the 20 million Americans who planted gardens in their backyards and on rooftops to grow vegetables and fruit, the families that rationed food and fuel, the children who towed their wagons collecting scrap metal from their neighbors. Everyone was personally doing whatever they could to ensure victory. And so through the heroism and sacrifice of those fighting at the front and the commitment of their families at home, peace was restored on this battleship 70 years ago today. On this deck on September 2nd, 1945, in Tokyo Bay, Japan formally and unconditionally surrendered to the United States, bringing to a close one of the darkest periods in history and ushering in a period of relative peace. Despite the exhaustion and trauma stemming from years of war, America recognized that it could not simply retreat from the world. We learned the lessons of the last great conflict, when revenge and demand for reparations from the First World War sowed the seeds of fascism in Europe, and when isolationism gave way to imperial tyranny in Asia. So instead of turning our backs on the world, we chose to turn our enemies into the allies that they are today. Japan was in ruins when occupation forces landed in 1945. Immediately after the war, American occupiers set out to democratize and demilitarize Japan, implementing land and economic reforms, improving working conditions, and granting women the right to vote. But reforms were not enough. The United States sent billions of dollars in economic and humanitarian aid to rebuild Japan. Most of that assistance was food. For even several years after the surrender, there was widespread starvation in Japan. It is hard to forget someone that sends you milk for hungry children, as Prime Minister Abe recalled in his recent speech to Congress. The decision that we made as a country to partner with rather than punish Japan helped to forge between our two countries what Senator Mike Mansfield described as the most important bilateral relationship in the world, bar none. Today, Japan is a leader in the Western world. We cooperate as partners to maintain regional peace. Our countries work together to stop the flow of terrorists and arms in the Indian Ocean. We work side by side in humanitarian relief missions and actively cooperate in maritime security and ballistic missile defense. The U.S.-Japan relationship is stronger and closer than ever. And so the greatest generation not only taught us about collective sacrifice and courage, they also showed us that the United States is the indispensable nation, that we are always needed as a force for peace and stability. We saw the Marshall Plan help to rebuild Europe and fight off communism. We saw American aid help Japan to recover and slow the expansion of the Soviet Union in the Asia-Pacific. We built many of the international institutions that still exist today in recognition of the basic idea that cooperation with other countries is necessary to sustain the peace. Of course, times have changed. We face new and unprecedented challenges today, from ISIS to cyber warfare and natural disasters. But like we did 7 decades ago, as Americans, we must decide how we want to engage with the world. And our efforts will stem from a spirit that says, when necessary, the United States will vanquish our enemies in battle. And after that battle, we will build a lasting peace. That tradition was born on this very deck 70 years ago today, when America emerged victorious. And so we owe it to this greatest generation, the men and women who sacrificed their dreams so that we could live in peace and freedom, to memorialize that tradition today and carry it forward into the future. Thank you.